Hello, thanks for joining. We're waiting for a minute or two while everyone else starts, continue joining, and we'll start in 1 minute. Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us. We're very excited about this space. This is the official launch of JustRE, the Global South Alliance for a Just Transition to Renewable Energy. We are very excited to share about us and also about our book. I'm just gonna go through a little bit of the agenda for today. I'm gonna give a bit of an overview of JustRE and what we want to achieve. Then we'll talk about our book that we wrote this year, and it brings together many insights and many learnings from all over the Global South. Then we'll have a panel discussion with some amazing guest speakers from across the Global South as well. And then we'll finally have a Q&A session with where you can participate and ask questions for the both the authors of the book and the members of JustRE and also our guest speakers. So how we want to do this and the Q&A is that if you have any questions during the presentations, please write it down in the Q&A space, and then we'll either answer it there or we'll select some questions to discuss in the panel. So if you have any questions, please write it down in the Q&A chat. Okay, so my name is Juan Pablo Cárdenas. I am the coordinator of JustRE Alliance, that is the Global South Alliance for a Just Transition to Renewable Energy. And we've been working in this alliance for this past year. This is our pilot, our first year, and I want to share with you what is our vision and what is it that we want to do in this space. So our challenge is, and the perspective of it is very simple, but yet super challenging, is that if we want to hit the 1.5 degree target, human civilization is going to install a lot of renewable capacity every year. Figures from the IEA said it's about 1 terawatt a year until 2050 every year to achieve this goal. So this brings two big challenges. The first challenge is that if implementing this enormous capacity will follow the same standards and the same logic as before, this has the risk, a very tangible risk of maintaining and worsening social injustices in the places where this will happen. And the second challenge with this is that community level acceptance and social acceptance of these projects are becoming a significant and very tangible challenge or barrier for the rapid implementation of this renewable capacity that we need to achieve the climate targets. So this is the two main challenges, and our vision or our goals from JustRE is to first to foster responsibility in large-scale renewable energy projects to ensure meaningful community development and active participation, and especially lasting socioeconomic benefits for the communities around the projects and for communities to be actively involved in the projects. And as a derivative of this main objective is to enhance the project's social acceptance, because they are increasingly doing social performance and social responsibilities in more meaningful ways. This will increase the social acceptance of projects, and thus we will contribute to a rapid and just implementation of renewables to achieve these climate targets. So it's pretty straightforward. It's a simple but challenging view that we have. And how we will achieve this is the purpose for JustRE. Basically, we have some work streams, and we want to co-create what the alliance is, inviting practitioners and multiple stakeholders from all over the global south to this platform to discuss and share experiences and share knowledge. So we want to build the alliance and make it cohesive and well-resourced and effective, especially effective to identify and implement solutions in places where there are gaps in research and practice. We want to have a focus in research and action, produce useful and rigorous tools and context-specific research and resources to bridge the gaps that we identify in the space. Then we want to connect, to exchange and learn. I'm going to talk in a minute about the organizations that comprise JustRE so far, and they come from different regions in the world, and we are starting from the certainty that our countries have so much to learn from each other, and this social responsibility and the implementation in renewables is happening at the same time, and sometimes in very isolated ways in different countries. And I think this exchange is going to be very powerful, because things that are learned or are applied and implemented in other regions can be transferred and become good practices worldwide. And finally, influence and impact. We want to be magnifiers or amplifiers of the work of the organizations that are going to be part of JustRE. And we want to, for the work that's being done on a grassroots level and a community level, to become impactful in a worldwide level. So this is the organizations that are the core partners of JustRE so far. Is the Climate Initiative from Mexico, is the Latin American chapter of the Stockholm Environmental Institute based in Bogota. It's inspired the Initiative for Social Performance in Renewable Energy, and is the Responsible Energy Initiative in Asia. So we were brought together by this conviction that with this exchange in how social responsibility is being practiced and challenges that we have facing our different regions, we can multiply the effects and make the just transition a more achievable thing. So I'm gonna leave it there for now. As I'm mentioning, we're just on our piloting year, and we want to invite every practitioner or different organizations that are working, especially in the Global South, but not limited to the Global South, to join us. We want to continue to expand this conversation and exchange. So those are my details. So please contact me and contact us, and let's talk, and let's make this alliance bigger and more impactful. With that, I want to hand over to Jole and Anna. They're going to present and give some insights about the book. Just a brief mention of Jole and Anna. Jole Vlokas is the managing director of Inspire. Inspire is the Initiative for Social Performance in Renewable Energy. It's a non-profit based in South Africa with the objective of advanced social development in renewable energy. And Anna Biswas is the managing director in India for Forum for the Future. So Forum for the Future is the organization that is representing the Responsible Energy Initiative as part of JustRE. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand over to Jole, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan Pablo, and welcome everyone. We are going to provide an overview of the book content, but we will keep it really high level. So please do take a look for further detail and more case studies in the full publication. The book was written over the course of 5 days. And the second slide shows a brief picture of those who were involved. The 5-day book writing process was made possible through a facilitated book sprint process involving and drawing on the experience of 8 different organizations.
Thanks. Next slide, please, Pablo. The book is written primarily by practitioners in the Global South, primarily for practitioners in the Global South, especially those working with various stakeholders in the scaling of renewable energy. We wanted to share insights and experiences from all of our initiatives, to compare notes, and to demonstrate that a just and equitable deployment of renewable energy is genuinely possible and desirable for everyone. We wanted to provide some much needed inspiration and make sure that we're sharing tools as we develop them for practitioners, whether they're in government, renewable energy companies, civil society, or other stakeholders, so that we can all drive meaningful change and not kind of duplicate efforts as we go. I'd just like to highlight that this really isn't an exhaustive collection. I think the collection and collation of insights and case studies will be an ongoing mission for the Alliance. We know there are many more organizations out there with experiences and insights to learn from. And we also know that even in the cases that we have here, there's so much more that we need to do before they really are truly just approaches. A couple of notes on the scope of the book before we dive into the content. It focuses on utility scale solar and wind, with the recognition that a great deal can be learned from the approaches being adopted in distributed renewable energy, but also recognizing that utility scale comes with its own particular set of challenges and opportunities, not least because of its size. Another thing to note is that we take a social lens to the just transition. We're not saying that environmental aspects are less important by any means. We just look at them through that social lens for the purpose of this book. In the past, just transition definitions have been based on safeguarding jobs because it has been predominantly in global north concept. But now we use, and luckily others are using, definitions that are expanding to recognize our context and the importance of justice and equity in much wider realms, such as tackling income and access inequality, rebalancing really unhealthy power dynamics, and recognizing past injustices. The book contains 5 main chapters that speak to some of the biggest areas of challenge, but also those of opportunity: socially responsible land and water management, social impact in the supply chain, community engagement, benefit sharing, and then multi-stakeholder governance. Each chapter has a brief section on the challenges, but the main focus is on how to address them, both generally and with certain stakeholders in mind. So hopefully it'll be useful to all of you. So please do take a look at it, as Hala said. Next slide, please. The first area we tackle is one of the biggest ones that we come across: land and water challenges. In all of our geographies, the pressure on land to provide is growing. We need food, energy, water, shelter, other ecosystem services, including cultural spaces and heritage, biodiversity, pollination and pest control, flood management, for instance, all of them from land. And with the need to triple our RE capacity, more so in some countries, we all know this is a lot of land that we're going to need. One utility scale solar plant here in India is the size of Singapore, and we know we need many, many more in order to meet that demand. But whether we have enough land is not the only challenge. Land rights, access, and water scarcity are also presenting challenges. So, in our context, land ownership and rights are not always clear. Processes can be outdated and bureaucratic, leaving them challenging to navigate and vulnerable to exploitation. Also, traditional rural ways of living, such as pastoralism, rely on access to land belonging to others or to access to common land. And agriculture employs many landless laborers that rely on daily wages for income. In some utility scale RE models, we know that both of these stakeholders would be displaced. And though new technologies are coming online for waterless cleaning, many RE plants still require water, but so do farms and daily life on that land. In times of scarcity, whose needs will be prioritized? So multiple challenges to do with land and water. So over to you, Hala, for what we can do in response.
In the book, in that chapter, and on the slide deck on the next slide, we share a number of tools and approaches to address these challenges in our context, including these minimum slides, these minimums on the slide. One case we found that provided useful insights was the much highlighted 2 gigawatt Pavagada plant in India that spans over 5,000 hectares of land. The right to fair compensation and transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act stipulates that land procurement for industry users has to include a negotiation process, including clauses about informed consent, rehabilitation and resettlement provisions for land leases. The state of Karnataka created a special purpose vehicle, an SPV, the Karnataka Solar Power Development Corporation. That was done to facilitate timely land leasing for the renewable energy developments. Land owned by individuals or groups of farmers was leased to the SPV, and the lease agreements were renewed after 5 years, with the payments increasing every 2 years at a rate of 5%. Some of the steps used to negotiate land lease agreements in this case studies with farmers were, for example, choosing a site with low agricultural potential and large individual holdings, forming an SPV with experts from the energy sector as well as the government's revenue department to ensure a coordinated approach to project siting, fostering a dialogue process between the landowners and the government's revenue officials to increase trust and compliance with land record requirements, ensuring leasing terms that are simple and are not including a change of ownership, and creating work opportunities for at least one member of each farming family in the solar park. While these approaches and examples were promising, the facility did fail to address gender issues in land use and also to conduct advanced participatory water budgeting. The concerns of landless agricultural workers, including women and tenant farmers, were also not prioritized. No environmental and social impact assessments was undertaken to identify potential concerns and develop rehabilitation plans. So some good insights on how to interact and work with landowners, but certainly also a way to go when it comes to working in justice fostering ways, especially with landless stakeholders.
Thank you. The second area on the next slide that we tackle in the book is the supply chain. Now, renewable energy supply chains are under increasing scrutiny, as we all know. Like many other supply chains, they contain human and labor right risks that financiers, governments, and customers increasingly expect developers and manufacturers to manage. They go beyond the high-profile risk of forced labor in Xinjiang and the plethora of social risks associated with the mining and refining of critical minerals to include issues such as labor rights in local manufacturing and assembly, and safety concerns in end-of-life disposal or recycling of equipment. On a different supply-related note, in some cases, construction labor that is brought in from other states or countries can create problems in that it creates a perception within local communities of unfair distribution of jobs, thus risking the community acceptance of the scheme. So what can we do about this? Ola?
So again, in this chapter, we try to respond to these challenges. It provides insights and approaches for managing the social impacts of mining and for improving the labor rights and conditions in refining and manufacturing, while acknowledging how challenging this systemic work really is. Approaches being led by governments, industry collaborations, and financiers are evident, including, for instance, Eventite's investee transparency requirements that provide a structured process for gradual disclosure of the multiple tiers of the supply chain and the risks therein. One area we found particularly interesting is the significant opportunity for local supplier development, as is evidenced in the book in the example of the Perdekral East Wind Farm Supplier Development Program in South Africa. In South Africa, renewables projects must make enterprise development investments within the economy surrounding the site. And to fulfill this requirement, the Perdekral East Wind Farm, operated today by Infinity Power, launched a supplier development initiative that provides training and development to improve skills, productivity, and capacity. Through this initiative, benefiting the wind project, as well as the wider local economy, the capacity building program, for example, had the guardhouse contractor receive SHEC training. The transport and security service providers received on-site defensive driving and gravel road training, and the waste removal service provider received basic business training and grant funding for personal protective equipment, PPE. So these enhanced skills enable the contractors to increase their income moving forward, as well as safeguarding their well-being.
Thank you. The third area is about the interactions with community. Increasingly, as more and more land is required for utility RE, more cases of community and industry interaction challenges are coming to the fore. Land acquisition processes can be opaque and exploit the information asymmetries often found in our context. Previous experience with infrastructure or other initiatives can actually mean there's a lack of trust from the community already embedded, and in some cases trauma from past exclusion or the effects of climate change are present that need to be really carefully managed in these processes. In some cases, poor expectation management can be a challenge in numerous ways. Communities may have been sold false promises, for instance, of many lasting jobs in an effort to gain their buy-in, or of voting rights that ultimately are found to not affect key decisions. Despite the extensive guidelines available and the legal or institutional requirements for community engagement, project time and cost pressures can result in hurried or superficial practices, even when developers wish they could do otherwise. In some jurisdictions, to enable ease of doing business, actually utility RE is exempt from certain legal obligations, which actually does present a risk in terms of proper management of the site.
Again, in the book, we share some good practices on community engagement across different jurisdictions. The case of KwaZulu, for example, goes beyond the established good practices to something more cutting edge in renewables, trauma-informed community leadership development. Inspire and the Center for Mental Wellness and Leadership partnered in the KwaZulu project, which developed and pilots effective social performance in traumatized contexts. The project focuses on communities hosting and holding shares in large-scale renewables projects by assessing the psychological architecture of the communities and implementing trauma-informed community leadership interventions. The word KwaZulu is significant, not just because the project is funded by the NGO called Resolve, but also the term KwaZulu means to resolve in isiXhosa. In the project, we explore and uncover the nature, extent, and depth of the impact that stress and trauma have on a community, thereby working to unpack and address the underlying neuropsychological factors. This allows us to recover and build sustainable coping strategies for individuals and the community at large. So following thorough analysis in this project, they developed strategies and objectives to address leadership challenges. We also developed frameworks, tools, and support to unlock the potential for community development and deepen positive community impact associated with their renewable energy shareholding in the community and other opportunities. We know that addressing existing historical and present time societal traumas is key in creating developmental impact. What has emerged during the implementation of the KwaZulu project is a lack of understanding and appreciation of the role that unresolved psychological wounds, whether collective or individual, play in hindering collaboration within and between project stakeholders in the sector. And also they hinder the advancing of sustainable impact more broadly. So moreover, there has been a lack of appreciation of the role of wounded leaders in preventing the success of community engagement and development programs, work that we are looking to continue in the future. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you. Without wanting to get into a discussion on the current state of market economics, the renewable energy sector operates within the same economic system as other sectors, with expectations and norms that largely focus on delivering financial gain for shareholders that can be at odds with addressing inequality. The fact that many of these utility scale RE plants are being erected in predominantly rural areas means they are inevitably witness to and affected by the level of rural poverty in our context. In some cases, the plants can risk exacerbating that inequality, for instance, where communities don't have renewable 24/7 electricity supply yet. Whilst in some countries, we're seeing industry players embrace the need to provide local benefits as a means to retain their social license to operate. In some cases, there's a perception that project facilitating infrastructure, so the stuff that is just needed to build the site, like roads, or mitigating impacts of the project, such as ensuring construction waste is well managed or any tree loss replanted, is enough benefit to the community. So low expectations are being set. In many of our countries, there is a perception that the community is not adequately capable of taking on the types of co-ownership or co-decision-making models that occur in the global north, holding us back from exploring some of these models. So what can we do, Hola?
Well, the book provides suggestions for how to identify the most appropriate benefit sharing model, designing it for the context and implementing and monitoring it as well. In Argentina, for example, Meliquina offers lessons that could be applied elsewhere. Meliquina designed an 18-megawatt solar project Antu 1 in collaboration with an indigenous community. Since the project design phase, the community has played a central role in the project as partners, landowners, co-developers, and shareholders. As there is no legal mandate for shared ownership in Argentina, this is really unique, a unique example of how a private developer partners with an indigenous community to develop a solar project. The community holds partial ownership in this project in exchange for their co-development efforts and for a land lease. So the Meliquina model sees the partnership with the local community not as a required social contribution, but as a competitive advantage to their project. This perspective implies a shift in the role of indigenous communities from passive benefit recipients to active and equal partners. Imagine if this was mandated for utility scale renewables. Well, it is actually the case in South Africa. The South African Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program, REAP, has been deemed a unique policy innovation, significantly influencing the country's energy transition. The program mandates renewable energy companies to contribute to economic development in communities within a 50-kilometer radius and district municipal boundary. One of the policy's progressive economic development requirements stipulates a minimum of 2.5% of community shareholding that needs to be allocated to an entity representing historically disadvantaged communities. The program's forward-looking perspective focuses on economic commitments that need to be complied with over the 20-year contract period of the project company. And to date, projects have allocated an average of 9% of total project shareholding to local communities, so actually outperforming the policy requirement. While this program is not without challenges, it is nevertheless encouraging progress towards shared ownership.
Thank you.
How about now?
Okay. So coming to the end of the book, we recognize the previous chapters presented many good practices and recommendations for the socially responsible implementation of utility-scale renewable energy, but that these actions cannot be undertaken alone. They require public institutions, the private sector, and communities, among other stakeholders, to align and collaborate behind a common vision. The policies, accountability, and institutional capacities of all the relevant actors are crucial, enabling factors to achieving a just energy transition. Institutional capacity includes the quality of leadership, the technical expertise, as well as the actual commitments, the systems used, and the resources to set goals and implement actions to achieve them. They are underpinned by legal and organizational frameworks and must effectively coordinate across stakeholders, managing competing interests, enforce regulations, innovate, and adapt to new challenges and opportunities as they often arise in our context. So we recognize this need for multi-stakeholder governance in order to make all of this happen. And the book really is a call to action for all stakeholders to play their roles in making a just transition to RE possible and achievable. That's a really whistle-stop tour of the book. Please do check out the detail of it for more useful details and examples. And so I'll just hand over to Juan Pablo.
Thanks, Anna. Before moving on, just a refresher, please download the book. It's free and available. We have so far an English and a Spanish version of the book. So please reach out. The English version is out there and available in our networks, and the Spanish version will be soon, but we can send over the PDF file if anyone is interested. So now we're moving on to the panel for this part of the webinar. I'm going now to introduce our guest speakers. that are joining us today. The Tsunami Magopa, she is the head of finance and acting head of economic development in the IPP office from the South African government. So the IPP is a term we're going to use a lot in this session, and it means independent power producers. This division is particularly close to Tsunami's heart because it's responsible for ensuring that the IPP program is structured in a way that contribute to the broader national development objectives of South Africa, including job creation, social performance, social uplifting, and broadening the economic ownership. Tsunami's passion is to contribute to the broader needs of the country, particularly in areas of infrastructure development. We also have with us Dr. Akanksha Tyagi. She is a program lead at the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water, based in New Delhi. This is a non-profit policy research think tank, and Akanksha's research aims to accelerate India's clean energy transition in an environmentally and socially responsible manner. She works on the circularity of clean energy technologies, designing solutions for responsible development of large-scale renewables, and shaping the narrative of job opportunities and green economy. It's important to mention that CEEW, the Council on Energy and Environmental Water, is part also of the Responsible Energy Initiative in Asia. Then we have Juan Dumas. Juan is one of the co-founders and partner at Melikina. This is a company that structures business partnerships where local communities are shareholders in renewable energy projects in emerging markets. Melikina is developing currently a utility-scale solar project in Argentina with a local community. And then Melikina is also exploring opportunities in Colombia and Ecuador and advising governments and energy companies on community ownership models. Besides that, Juan has broad experience in negotiation and consensus building. Yeah, leave it like that. And then finally, we have Jose Vega. Jose Vega is as a practitioner in the field. He's also one of the co-authors of the Powerful Futures book. He's a research associate at the Stockholm Environment Institute in the Latin American office in Bogota. And Jose's research focuses on fostering just transitions towards renewable energy and the phase out of fossil fuels. He has led research on how community concerns, institutional and policy frameworks influence the success or failure in upscaling renewable energy while advancing a just transition. His work is particularly focused in La Guajira region, a region that is critical for Colombia's energy security and the development of renewables in the country. So yeah, with further ado, I'm gonna hand over to Jose. He's gonna be part of the panel and also moderate and lead the discussion with our guest speakers. So over to you, Jose.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. I'm very happy to be here, both sharing the first product of JustRE, the book Powerful Futures, which my colleagues Jole and Anna did very well sharing, and also sharing this space with the three fantastic speakers you referred to, Juan Pablo. These speakers have gathered strong experience from different perspectives, including public policy, private sector, and even research viewpoints. One of the key pillars of JustRE is its focus on ensuring that renewable energy deployment is inclusive and just, particularly for local communities. And in my experience as on-the-ground practitioner and researcher on the topic, particularly in Colombia, one of the key lessons that stand out is that community support depends less on the projects or technologies themselves and more on how they are implemented or carried out. In other words, it's more a matter of how than what. Time and again, we've seen that projects thrive when they focus on engaging communities from the outset, ensuring that their voices are heard in decision-making, being transparent about the benefits and even with the potential impacts of the projects as well. For instance, in Colombia, where renewable energy potential is immense, the failure of projects often comes not from technical challenges, but from a lack of proper consultations with local communities. Consultations and engagement, which includes benefit sharing, effective community engagement, multi-stakeholder governance, and all that my colleagues have referred before. Projects that engage at this level build trust and long-term partnerships. Another critical process is, as I said, benefit distribution, whether through profit sharing, job creation, or infrastructure investments. Ensuring that the community sees tangible benefits is key to building this long-term support. In Colombia, for instance, we've seen that when communities feel sidelined, resistance grows. But when they are partners in the project's success, they become its greatest champions. So some of these and other challenges will be explored by our panelists today, as we discuss how to make the energy transition or the transition to renewable energy truly inclusive. So with that said, I'd like to start with our first panelist, Tsunani. Tsunani is coming from this wealth of experience in South Africa, which has been mentioned by Hole and Anna when presenting the book. Many good practices are coming from there. And there is a unique policy environment in which the Renewable Energy Procurement Program stipulates requirements for community participation in ownership and also a range of additional community benefits that need to be added in order to be awarded these projects. So Tsunani, in these 13 years into the implementation of this auction approach, what 3 points of advice do you have for other countries or private sector stakeholders who are looking to integrate such non-price elements into the procurement of large-scale renewables?
Thank you so much, Jose, and good afternoon from my side. Good morning to everyone else on your side. I think I've had enough introduction, but the IPP office mandate is dual-fold. So we procure new generation capacity as mandated by the Minister of Energy, but also we monitor the implementation of certain commitments and imperatives that were made at bidding stage by the IPPs from an economic development point of view. So as part of our program, we require, as I think Holly has mentioned, a specific percentage of your revenue to be committed to specific enterprise development and socio-economic development initiatives. And these are monitored by the IPP office over the years. So in designing these initiatives, I think the IPP office made a clear stance that we will not be prescriptive in terms of what you do. I think the book covers it a bit more in detail in terms of the engagement that you have to have with the community. So there's no silver bullet. There's no standard operating procedure in terms of how you determine these initiatives. The original expectation was for the IPP and the community to have in-depth engagements and find each other. But what we've realized in the IPP program, which was an unintended consequence of the setup of the program, is that these two stakeholders are not on the same page. Their focus is not the same and their expectations are not the same. IPPs typically are focused on the megawatts, while communities are focused on the maximum benefit that they can actually get from that project. And to a certain extent, handouts in other communities that we've seen. So there's an imbalance in the relationship between the IPPs themselves as well as these communities that we speak about. And finding that balance is quite a tough ask. So the first recommendation that I would have would be to look at the circumstances of each and every region, each and every society, South Africa being one, and design the procurement program in a way that addresses this imbalance and creates a balanced relationship between the two. The solutions to this are quite different and quite vast. We are currently looking at pulling together all sorts of all funds and creating bigger impact and more impactful initiatives, as opposed to leaving it to the individual IPP to struggle with those specific communities, particularly the volatile communities. From bid window 4 onwards, we've actually made provision for that, for the funds to be centrally managed, where bigger, more impactful, more sustainable projects are actually realized through these funds. Another initiative would be to actually get involved as the procurer, get involved in the community engagement, make sure there are frameworks, that sort of certain prescribed minimums in terms of how to engage the community. And I think the book covers that in a lot of detail in chapter 4 in terms of community engagement. The second point would be the framework around good practice in terms of how you actually design these initiatives. Chapter 5 of the book, I really love the book, by the way. I think it covered or encompassed quite a lot of the challenges that we face, and it's quite interesting to see that the challenges are faced. It's not just a South African thing, it's a worldwide thing. So it's not news to any of us. We appreciate these initiatives and sort of these platforms where we get together and discuss these things. So I quote from the book, and I loved these: sustainability beyond project closure is essential. It's very, very essential. We've seen it in the mining sector where initiatives were made after the miners left, we leave ghost towns behind. So the community needs to benefit way beyond the 20 years of the PPA. So questions around how we design these initiatives, how to take people along through that journey and not leave them behind, reporting structures from the procurer side, from the governance side, that are not tedious and onerous, that could possibly incentivize compliance-based spending. It needs to be impactful and it needs to be sustainable, and they need to be able to live well beyond the life of the project. And I think my last point would be policy alignment and buy-in from all spheres of government, being in the South African context, and being very highly regulated, very bureaucratic. It's important to have all makers of policy be aligned and have buy-in in what you're trying to achieve, especially in a critical time or period where we are transitioning and we're trying to make that transition just. So there's a lot of dependencies in government from a policy perspective. Having moved in South Africa from the 2017 procurement regulation, where you could put mandatory criteria for compliance purposes, to the 2022 regulation, where it's not mandatory for IPPs to actually commit to all or any of the elements. It's really just voluntary, but they score higher points in terms of the more they commit. That has unfortunately seen us see quite a significant reduction in the commitments that we see through the program. That, coupled with the change, previously we used to seek a 70-30 exemption from National Treasury, to say 70% price and 30% economic development perspective. From a point scoring perspective, we've reverted to the 90-10, which means basically the ED element means or counts for less in terms of the scoring. So that is an unintended consequence of those policy adjustments. And I think those are some of the good examples or most significant examples of the importance of policy alignment in government to foster this growing industry and to ensure that the transition is just. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you very much, Sunani, for those reflections. Really important, and it really resonates with what we have outlined in the book as important key points. Akansha, let's follow with you. And also the very last part of Sunani intervention in terms of policy alignment and community engagement really connects to a question we wanted to ask you, Akansha, and it's in terms of your role in the Renewable Energy Initiative is to enable this more effective interaction between stakeholders at a project level in India. So how does that interaction with local communities work at the project level when planning, building, and maintaining utility scale in India? And what are some of the challenges that you've seen, and how have you tackled them?
Thank you, Jose, for the question, and congratulations everyone who worked on this book. So renewable energy sector in India, it has emerged as a key driver to achieve economic growth while decarbonizing. Over the years, we have seen the sector attract a lot of investments from both international and domestic markets. Now, coming to your question of how project developers in India interact with communities, I think the interaction is through various mediums, and it's often reflected at all the project stages. So right from project inception to its construction, development, and overall operations throughout its lifetime. In our experience, the first contact is established when the developers are looking for viable project sites. Of course, they identify sites based on technical feasibility and whether the resource is there, whether the grid connectivity is there, but the willingness of, let's say, the locals and the landowners to participate in project development is also a key factor for them. So they rely a lot on local actors to identify who are these willing landowners who could participate in the project development. And these actors are often from the community, and they also facilitate project developers in aggregating the land for projects, for instance, and overall to build a positive perception about the project among the communities. So that's really the first point of contact between developers and the communities. And if you notice, it's not really direct contact, but via involvement of local actors. Now, even during the project construction and its timely maintenance, the developers also reach out to these local contractors to hire community members for different job roles. Now, as it was also highlighted in the case study about the Pavagada solar plant, right? There were a lot of emphasis is now being paid on how to create jobs for locals if a project is coming up in their vicinity. So we have seen during our research in India that although RE projects, they can generate a lot of job opportunities, but not all are accessible to the communities because of the difference in the skill sets that the communities have as well, but what versus what is needed in the project. So often a time the jobs that are offered to locals are either for maintenance activities, let's say panel cleaning, for even providing some transport services. Let's say if they have to transport some water supply, let's say tankers and all for during the construction phase or even during the maintenance period. And even for security, let's say a lot of locals are hired for the security of project sites. So even to communicate about these job openings, about the requirements, and some other features for this occupation, this communication is made through local contractors who advertise about these jobs and also facilitate in hiring at the project sites. These are during the project deployment cycle and as well as the project team that is engaging with communities. But at some point in time, depending on the strategies, even the CSR, the corporate social responsibility division of the developers, also come to engage with communities. And the idea is to understand what are their requirements, what is the community's requirement, as well as the landowners' requirements, so that they can inform their CSR activities about based on the developmental needs of the community. Now coming to the challenges, right? Like this is how the interactions are made. But so the challenges that emerge in interactions is also during the early phase of the project, when a project is being conceptualized, and it's largely coming from what is communicated versus what is realized by the community. So a lot of unfulfilled community expectations of what could be the core benefits of these projects being deployed in the vicinity, that leads to a lot of tension. And this miscommunication is about what kind of compensation could be offered to them, what kind of job roles and opportunities are offered to them, the quality of these jobs. So a lot of these are point of contention between the communities and the developers. And often a time, it is because of the local actors or these mediators who are engaged. So what is what the developer is trying to communicate versus what is it actually communicated to the communities via these local actors is what leads to a lot of this communication gap. And so in our understanding, the huge scope, there is a huge scope of improvement in how developers can engage better with communities. And some of the best practices that we have seen by project developers in India is that they engage not just with individual landowners, but they also engage with the village level administrations to better understand the community needs. Often these village level administrations, for instance, we call them Gram Panchayat in India. So they have a representation from all, all members of the community, be it marginalized, be it, women or other sections. So they have a very representative composition of the group, and consultations with them help us to understand the community needs as a whole and not just skew them for a certain section of the community based on the power dynamics. So that's one of the practice that we have found. We have also seen developers have open consultations through these mediums to discover the compensation rates for land procurement, because they are trying to avoid what this misalignment of, or maybe a very varied price discovery for land lease rates, for example. So what they do is they use these platforms to hold open consultations and then discover a compensation rate which is communicated openly to all the community members, and that leaves very little scope for any miscommunication. They also do skill development activities, but not just in bits and pieces. We have seen a lot of developers develop skill development or training centers as a whole, so that they become like a key infrastructure for the communities, and then they continue to do these trainings for them or other skill development activities that overall improves the employability of these members. So the idea is that because they realize not all the jobs could be available to locals, so how do you build their capabilities and improve their employability overall, right? So that's why the focus is not just to do one-off trainings and leave the communities in hanging, but to make these activities an integral part of their lifestyle and of the ecosystem surrounding them, so that they continue to leverage it. Now, these strategies are really, a notch above what the status quo is, but there is a lot that can be done. One clear gap, if you just were following what I was saying, that the developers, if they are engaging these local actors, their capabilities can also be built. These can also be informed better about, let's say, what could be communicated to the communities about the project, what kind of promises can be made. So having, let's say, a standard document that these actors can refer to, either and then they engage with either the landowners or even with prospective job seekers, that shall bring in a lot of transparency and clear communications and avoid any misalignment in what is promised versus what is realized. And there can be many more scope for improvement, but I'll come back to them. I'll pause now and come back to them later. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Akansha. Those are great reflections. Just a friendly reminder for all our participants today. There is a Q&A button on top of the Zoom link, of the Zoom software, where you can post your questions. So I see that already Akansha and Sunani have left really important thoughts that we can follow up with questions. Right, so we have then Juan Dumas, our third participant, third speaker here. And Juan have more than 20 years of experience mediating disputes between companies and communities. And after all those years, Juan, you co-founded Melikina to trailblaze renewable energy IPP project development with community equity in Latin America. Hole mentioned in the book presentation this project ANTU1, which is also briefly referenced in the book. It's a first of a very much growing pipeline of projects. You're also advising large companies on how to incorporate this business model into their portfolio. So reflecting on all this experience, Juan, what are the 3 key lessons you learned that you could share with project developers like yourself and community stakeholders that are looking to achieve similar projects with high value added from communities? Thank you, Jose. Well, first, let me congratulate everyone on the book, and also thank you for it. It's no small task to condense such a wealth of knowledge and experience from the Global South for the Global South. So thank you for it. I also want to say that our vision from Melikina goes well beyond acceptability of projects. So the first lesson for us is communities can be very good business partners. And as Holly said at the beginning, it is in fact a competitive edge if you know how to partner with communities. Thing is, you have to do it well. And that requires a series of things. First one is that communities are tired of being treated as an obstacle to projects, as being placed in sort of the cost side of the equation. If they are brought to the other side of the equation and they are brought as partners and they are invited to partner with you in a project, then they, as you said, they will make that project theirs and they will champion it. And that is no longer something that we thought as a hypothesis. It's something that we're seeing on the ground as we develop our project with the Millaqueo community, the Antuwan project, this 18 megawatt solar project. And the interesting thing here is that the concept of participating as partners in a business deal is not something alien to them. They do business every day. It's just that this is a more complex kind of deal and it's a different scale, but they understand everything, the terms, everything is very clear to them. So if you come to them and say, we want to partner with you, no handouts. It's not that because you accept the project, then we will hand out, 10% of shares to you. That's not how it works. You'll have to earn your percentage, your shareholding percentage, and they understand that very well. So that kind of approach from the very start, the very beginning, project inception, aligns interests in a very good way. So if we have time later, I'm very, very happy to share how we do this, how we value communities' participation, shareholding participation, what it is that they can contribute to add value to the project. But yeah, that would take a really long time if I do it now. So that's number one. Number two is that this, of course, requires higher upfront investment during the very early stages of project development. But as we said, this aligns interests in a better way, and it will deliver better social performance along the way in the project cycle. Now, the challenge is that there are very few funds that actually fund early stage development. And there are no funds whatsoever that fund community engagement in early stage project development. So we had plenty of situations in which we approached development banks, different types of investors, impact investors, and the response we got was always the same. It was like, this looks great. It covers all the gaps in terms of social performance of renewable energy projects, but you're too early for us, right? This is too risky for us. We're ready for you when you have advanced development of the project. So mostly when you're shovel ready, right? When you're ready to build. And the truth is that it's difficult because, as I said, you're adding some upfront investments in terms of getting the community up to speed to be able to participate in this. And so what we learned is that you have to invest your own resources in doing that. Whether you're a large company doing this from your development department, whether you're a small developer, just commit to it, be in there for the long haul and invest your own resources because nobody will fund you, right? And yes, there will be people at the end of the line waiting for you and maybe interested in funding you for the construction stage or maybe late stage development, but early stage development, nobody's really interested.
So what we are doing as well is we are putting together a blended finance instrument that will allow for early stage investment with community, early stage investment for project development with community shareholding. So that's number two. And number three, what I would say is that even though these models work without any subsidy or any policy incentive, there is very good experience from other places in the world where when the right incentives are put in place by governments, by the state, then this can be scaled up much more quickly. And I'm looking particularly at the experience of certain provinces in Canada. They've used loan guarantees, development funds, quotas of megawatts, and a series of other instruments that have been very, very helpful in powering up these kinds of partnerships between private companies and public companies at times and First Nations. So maybe I'll leave it at that, and we can discuss it further if you want.
Thank you very much, Juan, for those great thoughts. We could definitely stay here for much longer time talking on all the experience you've had, all the challenges, the good practices, and I feel like we can learn a lot already from you three. So we have thought of a Q&A session right after this conversation. And for that, I'll hand over to my colleague Juan Pablo, who will take us through these few questions we have. So Juan Pablo, over to you.
Thank you, Jose. So yeah, for our attendants, if you have any questions at all, now is the time. I'm going to lead with the questions from our side to Juan and Tsunani and Akanksha. Maybe you can give just a brief perspective of what you think and needs. What is the main potential value or the value that you see in what we're trying to do with the JustRE Alliance? So we identified this gap of knowledge across regions, and that's what we're trying to what we're trying to do. From your perspective and from your experience, what's the main thing or the greatest potential you see in this alliance and platform across the global south?
I can go first.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I think we need more such platforms to basically convene different actors and actors in different capacities. I think platforms like these help to test ideas also. I think otherwise, let's say we all remain in our silos and continue to build strategies or solutions which might not be as effective for other entity. Let's say if I were to recommend few strategies what developers could take, but I would have limited experience of whether it is practically feasible or not, or maybe I'm underestimating the resources that would be required. So having such platforms that can facilitate dialogues between actors of different capacities will really helps to even design strategies and even prioritize them. So that for me is the biggest USP for such platforms.
Thanks.
Yeah,
and
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Juan. Thanks. And I couldn't agree more. I think from my perspective, collaboration is key. And it's a key word and it's a buzzword that we've all been throwing around to say, let's collaborate. I think one had a refreshing perspective on communities being business partners and giving you sort of a competitive edge to sort of master that relationship and that imbalance that I was talking about. Collaboration with communities and in the environment, collaborations with government and business as well. I think we can do a lot individually, but when we all hold hands and we contribute what we can to all the initiatives, we'll see a much juster transition. Thanks.
Thank you. I agree, and only to add to that, what I would say is that there are a series of policy instruments that are being tested all around the world to improve the social performance of renewable energy transition, or to make this transition a just one. And I think that a platform like this one can help us learn what those instruments are, how they're being tested, under which conditions they work better, and help governments incorporate those in their legislation. So I think that that's certainly one contribution that this platform can make. And then the other one is we're all trying new things. We're trailblazing in a way, and so to be able to share what we're doing, get some good criticism from practitioners from across the world, from the global south, that would be wonderful. And then finally, I wanted to mention that there is a really interesting experience going on in Nepal related to hydroelectricity. They've done a lot with local public shares, for example. And I think that exploring the usefulness of that approach to other parts of the world is quite interesting. I asked people in Nepal, why is it that nobody else in the world is trying this or doing this? And they said, well, because essentially we're not very good at showcasing what we do, right? So a platform like this one could actually help a government like that one to also be able to share the kinds of experiences that they've been putting in place for the last 20 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Juan and Tsunani and Akanksha for your answers. And yeah, I think on that note, we're already 8 minutes past the time. Yeah, I want to reinforce that message that's the specifically what we're trying to do with the JustRE Alliance. And I think and we all believe that there's a lot of potential for that exchange. And how Juan just phrased it, I think it's going to be very useful, especially for amplify what the work on the ground that it's been done all over the world. So on that note, I want to thank all of the assistants for joining us today, for taking the time. Invite you again to reach out if you are a practitioner in the field, if you're part of an organization or from the private sector or government, reach out and let's start the exchange going. And just finally, big thanks to Juan, to Tsunani and Akanksha for joining us today. It was amazing. We were just discussing on our private chat that each of one of you could give a master class easily on each of your subject for a couple of hours or a full day. So it was amazing to have you here. And then, to the JustRE team, thanks a lot so much. And for the authors of the book, remember to reach out to get the book and share it with your networks. And with that, thank you and have a rest of your day wherever you are in the world.